Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time today to learn more about the ArtsBloom 2026 Request for Proposals. I'm Heather Anderson with the Office of City Planning for the City of Rochester. Our team manages the Percent for the Arts program for the city. I'm joined by a few other city staffers today. Kevin Kelly, Manager of City Planning, Prathiksha Balaji, City Planner for City Planning, as well as Johanna Brennan with our Law Department. A few items before we get the presentation started. Please mute your audio if you have not already done so. We are recording the meeting so that anyone who was unable to attend can still review the recording and know the information. The recording and slide deck will be posted to the RFP webpage and emailed to everyone who has emailed us about the RFP, including everyone who registered for today's information session. We are joined by an ASL interpreter. Thank you, Connor, for joining us today. Connor will be spotlighted on screen so that deaf and hard of hearing people can also access this presentation. Lastly, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat during the presentation. We will do our best to respond in the chat as you enter them, but keep in mind that we will have time for questions after the presentation, so we will review all questions in the chat and responses to them at that point. Thank you, and now I'm going to turn it over to Pratiksha.
Thank you. I'll go over the agenda, and first we'll be going over the RFP, which covers the eligibility and the application. Then we'll go over the lessons learned from last round, and lastly, we will open for questions. So this year, you can request ArtsBloom funding for 5,000, 10,000, or 20,000, which is very similar to previous years. And I will first go over eligibility. So individuals or groups are eligible for ArtsBloom funding. And groups do not have to be a licensed business, be MWBE certified, or be a nonprofit to receive ArtsBloom funding. Individuals and groups do not need to have a fiscal sponsor, but we recommend considering whether or not you will need to issue checks to artists or businesses as a part of your programming or project, and if so, whether you are comfortable doing that. Because if your proposal is selected, you will be invoicing the city and receiving payment from the city, and you will then be responsible for using that money to pay any artists or businesses that need payment for their services or materials. So groups can only have their name on one proposal, and individuals can only be an applicant on one proposal. So in other words, an individual can only have their name as a lead applicant on one proposal, but they might have their name on more than one application since may be involved in a group that is also applying, or they may be on the project team for for another application. Individuals and groups can only receive ArtsBloom funding once every 3 years. So anyone who is awarded ArtsBloom funding in the past 2 years is not eligible this year for ArtsBloom funding. So there are 4 eligibility requirements for arts programming and projects for ArtsBloom. And the first the programming or the project must belong to one or more of these categories. So for arts education, it could be classes or workshops, and for literary arts, it could be poetry or prose that could be distributed through printed or digital formats. And for performing arts, it could be dance, music, theater, and for visual art, it needs to be temporary. So it could be exhibits or galleries. And the second is that the arts programming or project must meet these public benefit criterias. Uh, the arts programming should be within the city boundaries, and we highly recommend that you verify this through the website uh, on if your project falls within city boundaries, since there are overlapping zip codes between the city and neighboring towns, it's important to verify that it falls within the city. Uh, so you can enter the address onto in this map and check if your project or programming falls within the city. And the other public benefit criteria is that the project or the programming should be free to participants or audiences or feature a free or a low cost component. And the third eligibility requirement is that your project must be completed between July 1st of 2026 and June 30th of 2027. This is our fiscal year of funding, and hence it's important that this funding is used within this bracket of time. And the last eligibility requirement is for the arts programming and project is that they must align with one or both of these ArtsBloom goals. And these goals are to reach historically underserved residents of the city and to provide paid opportunities for local artists or small arts organizations in Rochester. And we have these goals to ensure equity and opportunity for all residents to have access to the arts. So here are a list of programming or projects that are ineligible for Arts Bloom funding. And we want to highlight that any project or program that is receiving special events funding is ineligible for Arts Bloom funding. And I also want to note that any physical or permanent art is also considered ineligible, and this could also include murals. Uh, since there's a different person for the arts funding for capital projects, this would fall under that. The application can be submitted online, but in case you need to submit a hard copy or submit the application as a Word or a PDF document, you can email me. So here is the ArtsBloom application process, and I will go over that now. And here are the list of items you need to have in your proposal and in the order they must be in. And because it's an online form, you may not be able to see all the questions at once. And if you prefer to draft your responses together, you can email me or Heather and we can provide a Word or PDF version for you. So, in the applicant information, you or your organization do not have to be located in the city, but your programming does have to be located within the city. And your project or program may fit one or more of these categories that we talked about. So select as many as that apply. I also want to note here that you're not going to get extra points based on the number of categories you select. And please also select one funding request amount, which is available in 5,000, 10,000, or 20,000. So if in the eligibility criterias you answered no to any of those questions, your project or programming is not eligible for ArtsBloom funding. And it's okay to not have a set date or location yet, but we do need to know that you're committed to having it between July 1st of 2026 and June 30th of 2027 and in the city. So if you're awarded for a project for a city location, such as an art center, a park, or a library, please expect that management of those locations may have feedback on which location would be best for your proposed programming. So you will also have to answer questions of whether your programming is free or has a low cost component. If it is a low cost component, you will need to include all known details, including what the cost would be without ArtsBloom funding. And if there is a free or a low cost component, you will need to share the details. For example, how many people will receive the free or low cost component, and how will you determine who gets the free or the low cost fee, and what the cost would be for other people. So the questions in the application lay out exactly what we need from you, so you don't have to worry about taking notes right now. And the programming is eligible to be considered sliding scale or optional donation if marketed as such, and the city will require marketing proof as well. So there's a public benefits section on the application, and these relate to the Arts Bloom goals as well, which we went over earlier. And these are both very important questions that you could take some time to answer. And the project need not align with both the goals. However, I will say that projects that align with both goals do score higher. And please include artists or project team addresses where requested in the application so we can assess ArtsBloom goal alignment. Uh, Please also tell us about any other public benefits that your project or programming will have that we didn't think about. So we do require a budget in the application process, and please include as much details as possible, including staff hours and billing rates and other expenses. We want to know how much money you expect to be receiving and how it will all be spent. And please also list all other additional funding sources for your programming or project. And if you do expect more than one source of funding for your programming or project, please show us which funding will cover which costs. We want to know what you propose to spend the ArtsBloom funding on. And if there is a cost for participants or audiences, please include what expenses the cost will cover. We assume that if it isn't free, there's a cost that needs to be covered, and we want to know what that is. And we also do highly encourage including marketing in your budget. Here, I really do want to note that capital improvements are not an eligible expense, and this could include building renovation as well as equipment or tools that will be used beyond the project or programming in your proposal. For example, the city will not pay for items such as a drill, a ladder, tables, and chairs because those items will be used by you beyond the project or programming and therefore are considered overhead for you, your organization, or your business. Uh, However, you can use ArtsBloom funding to rent equipment needed for your project or programming. And another thing to note here, which is important, is that items that are sold for profit are an ineligible expense. For example, ArtsBloom funding cannot be used to design and print a book that would then be sold, with the proceedings going to an organization. However, ArtsBloom can fund an event at which items not funded by ArtsBloom are sold for profit. For example, ArtsBloom can fund a theater performance at which an organization has a table where they sell merchandise. And another important thing is to not include tuition or tickets as an expense in your budget. Instead, you can think about what ArtsBloom funding will pay for, such as teaching artists time, materials, or administration fee. And the admin fee cannot exceed 20% of the total budget. However, the total project budget could be larger than the ArtsBloom funding. So theoretically, admin fees could be more than 20% of the ArtsBloom funding requested. In the online application, you will find two places to upload your experience or your experience related to the program. Please combine all of the images and then upload it as a single PDF file. Um, it reduces likelihood of human error from our end as well. And links to videos should be included in your responses to experience questions as well. And in this section of the application, we want to get to know the full team and their experience as well. We're also looking for workforce goals bonus points as well as MWBE bonus points. The city has goals for a certain percentage of contracts or work through contracts to be awarded to women and minority workers, and MWBE goals here only apply to 20,000 funding requests. So here is the evaluation criteria. It is also mentioned in the full RFP, so please review it uh, before you fill out the application. It has a lot of important details as well. Um, and I already discussed the MWBE and the workforce goals bonus points, but please also note that the city awards bonus points for consultants that live in or have an office in the city. And next, now I will go over the lessons learned from previous years and some common issues that we have found is a lack of clarity on project description. So please take time with your project description and incomplete budgets or errors in budgets are also something that we see very commonly. So the budget would not show what the cost would cover with ArtsBloom funding. And another common issue is not having enough information to show how well the proposal met the ArtsBloom goals. So we want to know, how is your project providing economic opportunities for local artists? And many performing arts relied on free events to satisfy reaching underserved residents' goal. And please know that there are other proposals that go above and beyond to show how their proposal is reaching underserved residents. And please also give yourself time to submit the application beforehand in case of any technical issues. Um, technical issues will not justify accepting a late application. In 2 years, we've had two applications not being able to submit because of technical issues. And one last note is also that this is a competitive process. In the first year, we received 56 applications, and last year received 50 applications. So we recommend you giving time into it. And another thing to note here is that there are so many proposals that are offer free programming, and they generally do score higher compared to proposals that are low cost. So that's also important to note. And another thing is that ArtsBloom funding is not a grant, so our awardees do not receive all funding as a lump sum upfront. So how it works is during the agreement period, awardees must invoice us for payments regularly, and the city pays based on invoice, and the awardees must also provide proof of payment and receipts for their expenses throughout the year. And if you're awarded and you cannot complete the project, you will not be able to get all of the funding. We have an information session for awardees with all of that information, but we want to make sure that you understand this generally before applying. So here's the timeline for the Arts Bloom this year. And the next deadline is the deadline for questions, which is on Sunday, February 22nd. All questions received will be answered in the week of March 2nd, and the responses will be posted as a PDF on the RFP webpage and emailed to everyone who has emailed about the RFP and everyone who registered for today's session. And the reason we have a deadline for the question is to ensure an equitable process and everyone has access to all the information. And the proposals are due by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, March 15th, and we will notify the awardees on the week of April 6th. And now we're open for questions.
Thank you, Pratiksha. If you could stop sharing screen,
Mhm.
that would be great. So feel free, everyone, to enter any questions you have in the chat. If you'd prefer to say it out loud verbally, feel free to use the raise your hand function or button to raise your hand, and we'll do our best to call on you or read out questions in the order they're received. During the presentation, we did have two questions, so I'll review those. The first is a cover letter for the RFP required? And you do not have to have a cover letter. In our first year of ArtsBloom applications, we required a cover letter, but since then we have switched to digital application, and there's not really actually any way to create a cover letter through that application. So yeah, no cover letter required. The next question in the chat is in the experience category for $5,000 and $10,000 requests, you do not require information. So to clarify, this is related to the bonus points categories, and there's three bonus points categories um, in addition to the Arts Bloom goals to some degree. But the bonus points categories are location. We give bonus points for artists or organizations that live or have an office in the city. There's workforce goals in which the city prioritizes awarding contracts to women workers and minority workers. And then lastly, MWBE goals, which is minority and women-owned business enterprises. So if you're state certified, you can get bonus points. So that's what the question is about. All proposals, we need information about location and demographics for the workforce in order to assess whether you will receive bonus points. The MWBE certification question is only for $20,000 funding requests. And that's clearly labeled in the application. So ideally, that should be very clear there. We're also, because Arts Bloom goals include um, uh, prioritizing increasing economic opportunities for local artists and historically underrepresented groups. That information also feeds into scoring. The demographics information feeds into scoring for Arts Bloom goals as well. Okay. Next question. Does the City of Rochester recognize LGBTQIA plus business owners when considering MWBE? So MWBE is a state certification that just includes minority. I believe minority is based on people of color and women workers, but we can clarify that and get back to folks on that.
Sorry to jump in. Some larger cities now recognize LGBT business owners as that. That's why I ask. I know New York City does, and I believe Albany itself does, but I'm not sure. I just didn't know if Rochester did.
It's a great question. We base our city goals for MWB on the state certification. So if the state doesn't, then we don't, unfortunately. But I'm going to look into that. Okay, next question. Do we need to cover all costs up front, then submit invoices to the city and then wait to get paid? So this question, right, is about reimbursement, whether we work through reimbursement or if we allow some advance payment. We do allow some advance payment for materials, equipment rental, and stuff, and payment to subconsultants. We do allow that. We have to work that out, the finer details of that in the contract discussion, but we do allow some advance payment. We recognize that we want to give opportunities to organizations and artists that are just starting out. And we understand that a lot of emerging or young organizations don't have the financial capacity to pay for things, 100% of everything upfront. So we do allow some advance payment. We do not allow advance payment for your time, and we do reserve typically roughly usually 10% of the project payment for to be paid after the project is complete. Okay, next question. If we are thinking of a series of art classes demonstrations at local rec centers, is it better to propose a class at every art center, or a class at just a few art centers, or a series of classes at one art center? And sorry, I need to close this window so I can see this better. And should we choose which rec centers, or you ask rec centers to request a class? Okay, so this is a great question. I think, well, what we're advising right now is you include in your proposal, if you have a type of facility that you want to propose programming for, include that. So if you say, in this example, it would be our centers. And then if you have an idea of which our centers you would like, that's great. A couple things. One, you're not going to necessarily get awarded more points by including a larger number of our centers. That's an important thing to know. And two, once we're reviewing internally proposals, we're going to be working with management for the different types of city facilities so that any proposal that's awarded, likely we're going to have some feedback from management of those facilities where they'd like to see the programming. So it's good for you all to be flexible. It is good to say what types of facilities you'd like the programming to be at, but just know if you're awarded, we're going to work with you and the management of those facilities to figure out where the programming is best held. Okay, next question. We have 50 artists working with us on this project as contractors. Do you need addresses for all 50 artists? So we recognize that that's a challenge sometimes to get all addresses for all the artists that will be as part of a project. It's helpful to know if the majority are local. It's also helpful to know the demographics breakdown as much as possible. Because again, we won't know if your proposal can be awarded workforce goals unless you can give us an idea of what percentage of that team are people of color and what percentage of that team are women. Does that answer your question, Gretchen? Not to put you on the spot, I just want to make sure I answered that question for you. Okay. Okay, next question. In regard to ArtsBloom goal of providing paid opportunities to local artists or arts organizations, if we are applying as a small arts organization and the funding will support members of our team, does this count? Um, so if you're applying as a small arts organization and your organization is located in the city, that counts as that would be providing an opportunity to a local arts organization. It's not about necessarily the members of your organization so much as your organization's office. Where there's an added discussion is if your organization is also planning to pay another organization or pay other artists outside of your group, then it's also helpful to understand who those, what we call sub-consultants, where those people are located. So we don't need to know the addresses of the members of your organization, just where your organization's office is, and then any sub-consultants, subcontractors that you're planning on having as part of the team, where they're located. Okay, these are great questions. Next question, are letters of support needed from the 4 sites we're working at? So, uh, if you are planning on, if you've already worked out with the locations where you're proposing programming that you've already gotten their approval, it is helpful to see that. So feel free to include that as an attachment in one of the places in the application that you can include an attachment. And if you can't find a place to upload those letters, feel free to email either myself or Pratiksha. I dropped Pratiksha's email in the chat so you have it as well with that attachment. We try to minimize the amount of additional attachments to prevent what Pratiksha mentioned, the human error. Things can fall between the cracks easily that way. So try to put it into one of the attachments that you upload into the application if possible. Next question, are festivals eligible? We held one last year related to an art exhibition we have, Small Business Saturday, and Economic Generation for Indigenous Artists. We are interested in replicating that annually. Thank you. So yes, festivals are eligible. It's just good to, keep in mind that anything that's funded through special events is not eligible for ArtsBloom. So quite a few festivals receive special events funding from the city. We want to make sure that we're maximizing opportunities for city funding. So if your festival is already receiving funding through special events, it's not eligible for ArtsBloom funding, but otherwise it is.
Heather, could I add something there?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I just noticed that that person had mentioned in their comment about replicating that annually. So maybe just a good opportunity to remind folks about the limitations on how often you can apply for ArtsBloom funds.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Yeah, folks are only groups, applicants, groups, individuals, awardees are only eligible for an ArtsBloom funding once every 3 years. So we do not intend for this to be ongoing operations funding for any project or artist or organization. We're really trying to maximize opportunities for emerging, really get things off the ground for new projects and new artists. So uh, right now, this is our 4th year of ArtsBloom. So any awardee that was awarded in 2023 in the first year of ArtsBloom is actually now eligible this year, but anyone who received an award in 2024 or 2025 is not eligible this year and won't be eligible again for 3 years. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, the next question is 2 projects that we are wondering about eligibility for. Number 1, a week-long Teachers Institute arts-based professional development for K through 12 educators led by museum educators and teaching artists. And two,
Hey, Heather, do you
teaching,
mind to just go back and repeat those questions again? I'm sorry.
no problem. So on this
Thank
question
you.
or the question before?
The one you're on now.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I saw you still signing. I'm trying to like make sure I wait till you're done signing for the next one, so I'll be
I
better at
appreciate
that.
that. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Two projects that we are wondering about eligibility for. Number one, a week-long Teachers Institute, arts-based professional development for K through 12 educators, led by museum educators and teaching artists. And two, teaching artist-led arts making at an outdoor community art festival. Could this count as a class workshop if it's drop-in during the festival? Okay, so the second one is a little bit easier to answer because that is what kind of falls into arts education traditionally, right? If we're talking about a teaching artist is leading an arts making session at an arts festival, that is clearly arts education and would be eligible. The first one, the week-long Teachers Institute professional development, I'm gonna have to put a pin in and do some internal discussion and get back to you on that, Molly. It's a good question, but I'm gonna kind of have a discussion. In general, we do want to, in questions like this where it's a little unclear, we want to say even if we internally determine that it is eligible, you have to keep in mind that things are going to be scored based on these categories. And so if it's in a gray area, it might not score as well as some things that fall more clearly into the categories. But I will follow up with you and we will include all of these questions in the question and answer document that goes out by the timeline table that Pratiksha showed. So we're collecting all the questions, even the ones that we can answer for you today, and we will include that in a Q&A document that we circulate in a few weeks to everyone who has reached out to us about this. Okay. Next question. I have the same question related to Indigenous people and tribal citizens, sovereign and First Nations people related to MWBE. Thank you. So, I'm going to say that this is since Indigenous people, I think, fall into people of color, then we traditionally, I think they fall into minorities for state certification purposes. But again, I want to stress that MWBE, it stands for Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprises. So the groups that can get certified through the state are first their businesses. They're technically businesses, right? They have a DBA, they are a business. So nonprofits cannot get MWBE certified. You have to be a business, first of all. And then it needs to be owned by a minority or a group of minorities or women or a group of women or a group of women of color. So I just want to stress that there. Okay. Next question. If we prepare our answers ahead, is there a word limit or characters with or without spaces to anticipate? So in the application, there are some long form questions that have word limits, and the word limits are written in the questions. I do want to say that with a Google form, you can't put a word limit in the response box. So we do appreciate people monitoring their word count themselves so that we don't have to necessarily cut an answer short when we're sharing your responses with review panelists. It's one of those things. In Microsoft Forms, they allow word count limits, so it actually kind of self-regulates, but Google Forms don't do that, unfortunately. Okay, next question. Would visual arts of a temporary nature be allowed, such as chalk art or chalk art festivals in the city? Absolutely. So the visual art category does just include temporary art, and that could be things like an exhibition in a publicly accessible space of art, or it can be art like chalk art or some other kind of installation that's intended to be temporary. And really, one measurement for that is we have in the RFP anything that has, if it's a physical object, anything that is going to need a cement footer, right, or steel structure, we consider that permanent. It's not temporary because it would be a whole other thing to remove it. But chalk art would qualify, would be eligible. Okay. Next question. Is this the new annual application schedule moving forward? We applied in May, June in previous years, including in 2025. So yes, we intend to have it uh, as early as possible in the calendar year to ensure that we can have awardees designated, selected, and then have contracts in place by July 1st, since that's when the program year starts. And some folks have summer programming that they're applying for funding for. So that's the intent. It's always been the intent. Some years there's a lot going on and we haven't been able to release it until later, but that's the intent. Okay. Next question. Is there a master list somewhere of artist/organization awardees for the last 3 years? So that's a great question. Currently on our arts webpage, the city's arts webpage, and Pratiksha or Kevin, if one of you could drop that in the link now. If you scroll down to where it's the ArtsBloom part of the page and click it to open it, we have the awardees for this previous year listed there. We're working on including on that page all of the previous winners from then the first and second year as well. So what's listed there now is the third year. We're going to include the first and second year on there so that you all have those examples to look at because we recognize that that's an important thing. And we'll go ahead and email folks when we have the webpage updated with all the awardees, but feel free to look now because you can see the awardees from the previous, from 2025. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I think that there's a couple other messages in there, but they're not really questions. So, these are great questions, you guys. I really appreciate it. We had a really good turnout today too. This is exciting. We always get excited to see all the proposals. I think Pratiksha mentioned this in the presentation, but we've had over 50 proposals every year. So it is pretty competitive. And so many of the proposals are lovely, lovely, lovely proposals that we would love to be able to fund more than what we end up being able to fund. But ideally, having this every year enables us to fund a lot of these projects. Okay, so Kevin, Pratiksha, Johanna, any other last thoughts? Any other details you thought could be helpful to bring up before we end the call? No? Okay.
Nothing for me. Just want to say thanks to everybody. We're excited to see these proposals and appreciate the work that you do in our community.
All good from my end.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing your proposals. Continue emailing us questions. This isn't the only opportunity for questions. Again, we're collecting, so send as many as you have to us so that we can put all those questions and responses together to make sure everyone has a really good understanding of the process. Thank you all so much. I hope you're staying warm, and keep in mind, by the time we select awardees, it will be back to beautiful weather here in Rochester. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Awesome job, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Connor.
No problem.
Connor, do you want to stay on?